Well, good evening. Glad that you're here tonight, and we get to meet again on Wednesday night. Thankful for that. Going to be working on our plans for Sunday, and if there are any changes to what we've been doing, we'll notify you. But glad we get to meet tonight and pick up where we left off last Wednesday night, and hope it'll help us as we're going through life here, and we get the opportunity to sing some songs tonight. I'm going to make a request that I've never made in over 16 years of pastoring. If you need the words tonight, would you use your mobile device to look them up? I can't believe I'm saying those words. That is not me. But if you would, please use your mobile device, and don't act like it's the first time. During all of our lockdown, I know you were using your cell phones for hymn singing. And if you weren't, then what were you using? But no, I'm just teasing. But we're going to sing Victory in Jesus tonight. And you might not need the words to that one in front of you. But we're also going to sing Come Thou Fount. And while it's familiar, you might need some help with that one. I'm sure I will. So anyway, those are the two we're going to sing, and great songs. I'm thankful that we can have victory in Jesus. Thankful that He's the Savior of my soul. He's my Redeemer. He's reconciled me to God. And every day He's there. Every day I get to walk with Him. And every day He gives me power to overcome. And I'm so very thankful for that. And I'm thankful that He is the fount of every blessing. That every good gift and every perfect gift comes from Him. Comes from the Father of lights, in whom there is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. And so I'm thankful we can sing about the fountain of blessing tonight. So let's stand, and Brother John, you come right ahead. Victory in Jesus. Let's sing it.
I'm cheating. I have it in front of me. I heard an old story, how a Savior came from glory, how He gave His life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about His groaning, of His precious blood's atoning. Then I repented of gets old. Brother Darrell Gamble, will you open us in prayer, please, sir?
Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you for this day that you've given to us. Lord, I just thank you for watching over us and protecting us and keeping us all safe, Lord. Lord, I pray especially for the older people in our church, Lord, that you would just put your hand of protection upon them and everyone else that's represented here tonight, Lord. Lord, I just thank you for all the many blessings that you have bestowed us. Father, I pray for the services tonight, Lord, that you speak to Pastor and just prepare our hearts. And be with Brother John as he leaves to go to Texas, Lord, to this job. I ask that you put your hand of protection upon him and keep him safe and also watch over his family while they're here. And we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Thanks, sir. Come thou fount. Come thou fount. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise mine Ebenezer, hither by thy help I'm come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a wanderer, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy grace, Lord, like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. So good to hear you singing out. Thank you.
All right, by Lord willing, by Sunday, we're going to be one step worse than asking you to use your phones. We're going to have the words on the screen behind me. It's just going downhill from here. But no, we are working on that, and we've got the capability, but not the ability, or I don't know. It's just not the availability. It's just not working tonight. But we'll figure it out by Sunday, Lord willing, and if not, we'll have some more song sheets or something. We can't do this phone thing because, you don't know whether to sing "Let Thy Goodness" or "Let Thy Grace, Lord." It's as bad as being in a church that doesn't have a right translation of the Bible or something. And so anyway, we got to get everybody on the same page and get unified. I'm telling you, Google does not bring unity to a church. I'm just telling you that right now. All right, enough of that. Let's go to 1 Timothy again tonight. 1 Timothy chapter 6. As you're turning there, let me ask you if you would please continue to pray for Peggy Pringle and the family with the loss of Brother Don there. And we know where he is, but there's obviously some grief and loss there. They were married for about 62 years. So I think she was 16 when they got married and hasn't known a day past that without him. And so that's tough. And so I would ask that you'd pray for Miss Peggy and pray for the family. And then it was good to hear this week from some members who feel like that they're ready to come back and join us for some services this weekend. And so that's always a blessing. And once again, that's not to say anything negative about people, especially our elderly people that aren't coming back yet. I understand, but it's a wonderful, wonderful thing when we can assemble together and just see each other. And with each new person that gets to join us and feels the freedom to do that, it just brightens everybody else's step a little bit more. And I didn't do something tonight. I'm going to have somebody remind me to do it on Sunday. But by special request, we need to, when we do our handshaking time, which used to be like this, now it's like this. And by the way, I need to say this about this past Sunday. We can't be having men doing this princess wave type stuff. This is going out on the internet, people. And that is not the image we want. But come Sunday, when we have our greeting time and everybody stands in place and waves at each other, we'll have a designated time where everybody here turns and waves at the camera on the back wall back there for everybody that's at home. We had some people really were offended, felt left out of the greeting time that we had during the song service, and I won't say any names or point to where they normally sit, but anyway, there's been specific requests, hey, have everybody turn and wave. But I did have several people say, as Brother Zach panned the camera around the auditorium, how much of a blessing it was from home just to see, oh, there's that person, and there's that person, there's that person. And if one of those people were you, then be encouraged that somebody was glad to see you. You know, and that's a blessing. We don't always get that, do we? So that's a blessing. It could just be that people are that hard up for familiarity and fellowship or something like that. 1 Timothy chapter 6, I'm going to pick right up where I left off last Wednesday night. Of course, everybody remembers exactly where that was and what we were talking about when I did that. But I basically concluded the message by saying a very sarcastic statement. If you didn't pick up on that, then you've carried that with you for a week. But I finished up the message with a very sarcastic statement when I said that surely those foods, speaking of meats with hormones and antibiotics and things like that, they couldn't be bad for us because they're approved by the FDA. They're approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And so I said very sarcastically that there's no way that Food and Drug Administration, which is an element of government and becoming more and more of a big government all the time, they get to say what is approved and what is not approved for human consumption. And surely they would never approve anything that would be harmful if consumed by a human being. But look, you don't have to do a lot of research to find out that through the years the FDA has approved many, many things that have only in time proven to be very, very harmful to the human body. And so I want to encourage everybody, you would be much better off following God's guidelines for what we should be eating than you would be following the FDA's guidelines for what you should be eating. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. But I want to just remind us of this passage. I want this to be in the center of our thoughts tonight as we move forward, as we continue this sub-series on food that we consume. And that's in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. Paul says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." I didn't look up how many billion dollar industry, I'm not saying that right, but I'm going to hopefully get you to understand my meaning there. How much money passes through the hands in the United States over food every year, but I'm assuming it is multiple billions of dollars in food. And don't ever think that there are not people who really are in the food business because they just love money, because they want their hands on that money. We talked about last Wednesday night how multiple meat farmers forsook the normal ways, normal practices of raising animals for the production of beef, of chicken, and things like that, and basically sold out to the conglomerates and larger companies to do it their way, which had to do with practices that would cause sickness among the animals because they're not natural environments that these animals are being raised in, which caused the introduction of antibiotics. And then naturally you want the animals to be as big as possible because you get paid by the pound for meat when it goes to market. And so there was the introduction of steroids, growth hormones, and those things have been documented to have adverse effects on human beings because of consuming the meats that bear those things. And so we know that meat is one category biblically that God has okayed us to eat. But what I encouraged you last week and what I want to remind us of this week is in the consumption of meat, I want to encourage you to eat meat that is as close as you can obtain to the way God made it. As much man, as unaltered by man as is possible. And you say, man, preacher, that's hard to find. And when you do find it, you pay for it. And that's because of the markets being the way they are. The normal prices are generally for meats that have grown up on these cattle lots and these chicken farms and things like that. Right now there's talks of meat shortages and things like that. There's some of your favorite fast food restaurants don't even have the usual options on the menu because of coronavirus things. And to be honest, I haven't looked into it. I'm not sure why that is or the causation there. But nonetheless, it's important for us to try to source meat for our bodies that is as much the way God created it as we can find. By the way, God didn't alter His creative way about the food that our meat eats. We are supposed to eat meat that eats the green herbs of the field and that eats the grass and that eats plant matter and things like that. So we need to try, for the sake of our bodies and to function the way God created us to function, to find the right kind of meat. And that really gives us an overarching principle here that we started a couple weeks ago, and that is that we need to be eating natural food. We need to be eating food that God created to be a resource for us, to be nourishment and nutritious for our bodies. God's the creator, God's the designer, God built into creation what man is to eat. And I am glad that God did make things for man to eat that taste good. Aren't you? Yeah. You say, well, that is not what comes to mind when I think about eating naturally. Yeah, because our thought process has kind of been corrupted about natural eating. I'm just going to tell you right now, just so you don't think I'm some kind of hippie or tree hugger or something like that, I'm not sure that kale wants to be eaten. I'm just not sure about that. I have tried it. There's been times in my life where my diet has been very strict, and at one particular point about 4 years ago was right during when all the kale rage was on, and it was kale everything. And I'm just going to tell you, I never ate a bite of kale that liked me, ever. And maybe you're in that same boat too, but I'm just telling you, kale fights back. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just so fibrous or what. Somebody says, well, you're supposed to cook it. Well, I tried that, and it just did not set well with me. So I've tried it raw. That was even worse. And the only way I could find any way whatsoever that it was tolerable is made in the form of chips, which kind of reduced the nutritional value of what I was trying to get out of the kale. But understand that leafy greens are part of God's original plan of what we should be eating, what we should be consuming. And by the way, our parents knew this, our grandparents knew this. Generations ago, even up to a generation ago, there was not one kid who grew up in a house anywhere in the United States of America that at some point their parent didn't say, make sure to eat something green. I don't know why that's a magic color, but it's in the Bible. He talks about the green herbs of the field. And I know that my mom did not always pay particular attention to colors, I don't think, of food. But I know that my mother-in-law did, and she instilled that in my wife, so that when I got married, my wife's going, no, we can't put this, this, and this together because they're all the same color. And I'm thinking, what does that matter? If that matters, put some food coloring in the mashed potatoes and let's eat. You know, if color really matters, we can turn them green. You know, there's ways to do that. But nonetheless, you know, that was instilled in my wife, and she's tried to continue in that. But we've got to have a variety of colors. Well, in 2016, I started having health problems, and conventional medicine was not doing anything for what I was dealing with. So I started doing some research and some study about diet and things like that. Guess one of the first things that I found out was a fact, and that is our body benefits from multicolored vegetation. We need to eat multiple colors. So we need to get some good peppers, and we need to get some leafy greens, and we need to get all these different colors into our diet. And sure enough, green is one of the primary colors. Raise your hand if you like broccoli. Now keep your hand up for just a second. Keep them up if you really like it without cheese sauce. All right, so some hands went down right there. So some people go, oh, I love broccoli. Smother it with Velveeta, and man, that's one of my favorite things to eat. Velveeta. Do we go there? Okay, let's just leave it alone. Let's just leave it alone. Some of you had Velveeta before you came to church tonight. That was a bad move. No, and I'm teasing with you about that. But it is I love the description on the box. It is a cheese food. I like that. It's not cheese. It is a cheese food, or a cheese-oriented substance. And it's good, isn't it? You melt a block of that down in a crock pot with some hamburger or sausage and some rotel. Is this speaking to anybody here? This is counterproductive to the message right here. But I'm going to tell you, that rotel has tomatoes and peppers and, you know, stuff really good for you. And it's colorful, and it's colorful. I see that was going somewhere. But listen, broccoli is a cruciferous vegetable. It's very, very good for you. It's high in sulfur, which your body does need. And there's lots of vegetables like that, and we need a good diet of vegetation. Now, about between 5 and 6 years ago, we started seeing a word show up that really had not been prevalent around food much before that. The only place you would have found this word earlier than 5 or 6 years ago was in Whole Foods or Mama Jean's here locally or something like that. It was the word organic. But then all of a sudden, about 5, 6 years ago, you start to see it in supermarkets. And then about 4 years ago, you actually start to see, even in grocery chains like Walmart and other larger grocery chains, you would see entire sections of the produce area devoted just to organic food. And there became this big push as to organic food. And somebody might say, yeah, what is that? Because I never really paid much attention. I looked at it one time, but when I saw the prices, I pushed the cart right on past it, and I went and got the other stuff. Well, let me explain a little bit about the organic label and how it pertains to what we're talking about even biblically here. It is this, that just like we talked about how man got a hold of meat and began to alter it so that a lot of the meat that exists today and is made available to the public is not has things that are harmful to the human body in it, so it is with produce that's sold in grocery stores and vegetables and things like that. And make no mistake about it, once again, it ultimately comes back to the love of money is the root of all evil. Because what happens, has anybody ever grown a garden? All right, have you ever noticed that it can be a headache to keep A, your vegetables alive, B, to keep other bugs and critters from eating them? But here's what I want to encourage you in. If bugs and critters are eating or trying to eat your vegetables, that's a good thing. Because a lot of produce that winds up on grocery store aisles and in grocery store produce sections, bugs wouldn't even attempt it. Because bugs know it would kill them. And the reason that bugs know that is because that produce has been sprayed with man-made chemicals. And by the way, chemicals that no one would ever say, open up your mouth, let me give you a shot of this. But those chemicals are sprayed on plants, they're sprayed on vegetables, they're incorporated into the actual makeup of plants, and that is all for the purpose of keeping the harvest. And then a lot of times you see things like, well, these were washed off or things like that. These were rinsed before they got to the market or something like that. But a lot of those chemicals actually get into the vegetables and they have negative side effects. And look, I'm not talking about conspiracy theory here. I'm talking about real life. That a lot of produce that is produced on some of these mass farms is sprayed with chemicals that are harmful to the human body. By the way, a lot of these sprays that are used that are known to be harmful to the human body are approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And so ultimately that comes back to not having a loss of crops so that the people involved can make more money. On top of that, a lot of produce that ends up in produce markets today has another issue, and that is that scientists, so-called food and agricultural scientists, have gotten involved and they have began to alter the genetic makeup of food from the way God created it. Everybody with me here? And so what these products are called are genetically modified organisms, or GMO. If you see GMO, that's a genetically modified organism. You say, well, what is a genetically modified vegetable like? Well, it's where they do this. They'll take a specific gene from a plant that say it has a natural resistance to a bug or a parasite or a fungus or something like that. They'll take that gene and they'll cross it over into this other vegetable to try to produce a vegetable that is resistant to that same blight, to that same fungus, to that same parasite or something like that. But what you're doing is they're actually fundamentally altering the whole genetic makeup of these foods, and science has proven that genetically modified organisms are not recognized by the human body. The human body doesn't know what to do with them. Often the human body stores the bad elements of these foods, and then the body doesn't know how to react. They have been known to cause cancer in certain situations. And I want you to understand the fundamental root from where that comes. It comes from man's alteration of something God created. And why does man alter it? Trying to make a product that lasts longer, that makes it all the way to the store to get sold to make more money. I'm just trying to be honest with you about this, that this is a bigger issue than just, these issues are bigger than just the price of things in the supermarket and things like that. Man has messed so much with our food for the purpose of making more money, that food is becoming more and more unrecognizable all the time. Now, as a matter of fact, this started a long, long time ago when man became, when science began to interact with the foods we eat, man became more nutrient-centered than food-centered. Now, God created man to draw his nutrients from what? From his food. We're supposed to draw our nutrients from our food. But man, through science, began to find out ways to extract certain nutrients from food. And then what they could do is they could alter certain foods over here and then claim to add the nutrients that they took out back into it so that they would get their side of it, which is it lasts longer on the shelf. It doesn't go bad as quickly. Therefore, it gets sold and doesn't have to be thrown away. So they're making more money off of it. But they're claiming that you get the same nutrients that were in it all along. Does anybody remember Wonder Bread? I think it's still available. But the big thing about Wonder Bread was, man, it came out and here's this white bread made with bleached white flour. By the way, I won't go into all of this, but I encourage you to do research on that. The process that wheat goes through today to make breads, cakes, all of those things that fill the middle of the supermarket, they are so chemically treated. I'm talking about with harsh chemicals like bleach and acids and things like that. And that wheat retains some of that and can be harmful to the human body. We're seeing that right now in the rise of food allergies that are going through the roof right now. And it's not so much that people are allergic to these foods, they're allergic to what man has done to these foods and all of the chemical treatment of it and things like that. But understand that anything that is nutritious for mankind, anything that gives man life, is also subject unto death and decay. Look that up in the Bible. Do a study on that. Anything that gives man life is subject to death and decay. So the same is true with wheat. We're just going to stay with wheat for a second. Same is true with wheat. But that means that if I take wheat as it grows from the ground and I make bread out of that wheat without altering it, guess what's going to happen to that bread in pretty quick order? Well, it's going to go bad. It's going to mold. You know why it's going to mold? Because the mold spores that are in the air and things like that, they find the nutrients that they're looking for in that bread, and so they go after it. I'm just going to tell you right now, there's something wrong with food that no other living organism will touch. Anybody remember the story about the McDonald's hamburger that a guy had stuck in a coat pocket, and that coat had been hanging in a closet for, I think, 2 decades, and he had forgot that he had put a McDonald's hamburger in there, and so he gets his coat out because his wife was telling him, clean out the closet, take it to the, you can look this story up, it's a great story. He pulls this thing out, it's been in his pocket for 20 years, it looks the same without any deterioration. He put it in a can, and a few years ago, he kept it sealed in a can. A few years ago, he opened it up again, and other than a little wrinkling on the top of the bun, and it's hard as a brick, it still looks the same. It's completely unaltered. Now, I'm not just cracking against McDonald's, okay? I get me some McDonald's every now and then too. What I'm saying is, if no living organism wants that, why would we? Because that means no living organism has seen something in that food that is necessary to it for life, and so it passed it for something else. And so the reason that mold gets on bread is because it finds something in that bread that it can grow on, that it can draw some nutrients from. You say, well, mold will grow on the white bread that I buy, preacher. Yeah, after a week or two or something like that. You understand that bread that's made from wheat, that comes from the way that God grows it, it doesn't have anywhere close to that kind of life. As a matter of fact, the reason there were bakers for years and years and years is because bread had to be made fresh every day. Every day. Matter of fact, I've done some study on the way grain was handled and prepared in ancient times, including biblical days. They actually would tie their sheaves up and leave them outdoors in the head until the grains of wheat, barley, and things like that actually sprouted in their heads. And then they would use them to make their flour and things like that with the sprouted grain. We are hearing a lot more about that these days too, because what they're finding is that it takes the germination and the sprouting of those grains to actually unlock the life-giving nutrients in that. But I'm just going to tell you right now that if you go to Mama Jean's or someplace to get sprouted grain bread, you better eat it quickly because it doesn't have a very long life. The reason that they use chemicals to take all of the real nutrients out of wheat and out of flour and out of bread is because it lasts longer on the shelf. Therefore, there's less waste. Therefore, they make more. Everybody with me about this? So we're not off the text. The love of money is the root of all evil. So here's what they did with bread. They're like, hey, we can extract these nutrients, like riboflavin and, you've seen the list. And we can fortify the bread. You ever seen that on the package? This white bread is fortified with key nutrients and things like that. Here's the problem with that. It's not in the packaged development as God made it. Therefore, there's bound to be problems with it. Then we get into this. Not just are they taking life-giving nutrients out that make food subject to death and decay, but they also have to add things in to ward off death and decay. So we start talking about food additives. And this is why that even though the FDA has approved a wide range of chemicals that go into food as preservatives, they do require now that nutritional information be labeled on packaging so that you can pick it up and you can read about the chemicals that are about to go in your body. Now, some of you are looking at me like you don't like this. I can't help that, but I am telling you the truth. I am telling you the truth. I've read from Genesis to Revelation. I can't find anywhere where they set down to a meal of sodium benzoate or sodium nitrite. By the way, you're going to see the word sodium on a whole lot of things, and there's a reason why. I don't know if we'll get to that tonight, but there's a reason why you see the word sodium on a lot of things that has to do with the series that we're in here and its appeal to the flesh. But there are all kinds of man-made chemicals that are put into foods today for the purpose of preserving them so that they can stay on the shelf longer and the company has less waste and therefore makes more money. Anybody seeing a theme here? Yeah. So we've got natural food that is subject to death and decay quickly. And then we have unnatural food that has either had life-giving nutrients taken out of it to preserve it longer, or chemicals added as food additives, as preservatives, which the body does not recognize and often does not know what to do with. Since these changes have been made in the United States of America and even around the world regarding food, no one can argue that medically Americans have become sicker and sicker and sicker. As man-altering foods has risen, so has the need for health care in the United States of America. Do not tell me those are not related. Don't tell me that Americans aren't so sick because of the foods that we are consuming. As a matter of fact, we've got terms like autoimmune disease, and I referred to that last week. You know, that term is relatively new. And really in the last 2 decades, and especially in the last decade, has it been on a significant rise where we're talking about where the body is actually attacking itself. And there's a wide range of autoimmune diseases, and I'm not going to go into all of them. I'm just going to address one, multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease where the immune system actually begins attacking the myelin sheath around nerves and the spine in the nervous system, breaking through the myelin sheath, and then all of a sudden your nervous system begins to short circuit. You have muscle spasms. You have the body telling muscles, organs, things like that to do things that the brain is not telling them to do. It creates major problems. We helped with some special needs offerings on multiple occasions. Brother Rodney Johnson, missionary to the Haitian people in Miami, he's been here and preached for us. He has MS. He goes through times where when he's having a relapse into MS, that his legs completely stop functioning and he cannot walk, he cannot move, he has to get around in a wheelchair and things like that. And not every case is because of food. Some cases are genetic, and that's true for almost all autoimmune diseases. But the reason we've seen such an increase in autoimmune diseases has been because of the type of food that people are consuming. And this has been validated by the fact that many people, when they have reversed their diet and gone to natural foods, the symptoms of MS have all but dematerialized. They've gone away. And people have been able to live normal lives provided that they continue to eat whole, natural foods. And this has turned the tide of a lot of people's lives. You can do your own research on it, but people have reversed rheumatoid arthritis by changing their diet to a whole foods, natural diet. They've reversed type 2 diabetes by making those same whole food, natural choices. And I'm not talking about just halfway, but 100%. Going all for it. And so we've got natural food versus man-altered food. And let's just be honest, we live in a sin-cursed world with sin-cursed men. And isn't it just like the world that we live in and the God of this world that everything man messes with only serves to harm mankind? And so if we can seek out foods that are as close to God created them as we can, surely our bodies are going to function more like God created them to function. It's a slap in the face of evolution to have that kind of thinking. It's a creationist thinking to say, look, God made me, God made the food I'm supposed to eat. I want to find food that's closest to the way that God made it and the way God designed. Let me finish by saying this. There's an organization, you can do the research on this, you can look this up. There's an organization called the Center for Science in the Public Interest. One quote about the Center for Science in the Public Interest is that they are not scientists and they do not have the public interest. And I would say mostly that's true. They call themselves a scientific organization. However, they are ran by vegetarians that are very much animal rights activists and against any kind of meat products or anything like that. They have money, and they use that money to lobby the FDA and to kind of press government officials for restrictions and things like that when it comes to the food. Like I said, they call themselves a scientific organization, but this speaks that on their website, one of the awards that they claim is Political Site of the Day. So that ought to tell you something a little bit about this organization, that they're more political than they are scientific. They have a history of rejecting true scientific procedure. They are against any kind of animal products. As a matter of fact, about 20 years ago, well, let me think here, a little bit over 20 years ago, this was in the mid-90s, it was this group that lobbied the government to really begin to press the food industry to separate from any kind of animal fats, which, by the way, the right kind of animal fats are not only healthy for the human body, they're essential for the human body. A large part of our makeup is fat, including our brains, and we need the intake of healthy fats, omega-3s especially, with the right amount of omega-6s. And so there's a necessity of animal fats in our diet. But with their political stance, they began to attack and press these food companies to separate from all kinds of animal fats. And the encouragement that was given was to switch to what had been recently discovered as trans fats. They really pushed this. Now, this tells you that they're not scientists, because over time, science found out that trans fats are extremely harmful to the human body, and we know for a fact in some cases fatal to the human body, to the point that even the FDA had to change their regulations when it came to trans fats. One of the greatest examples of this pressure that this organization put on the general public was to pressure the public to really put pressure upon McDonald's. Now, I believe wholeheartedly in this case, McDonald's was the victim. Now, you can feel how McDonald's about McDonald's how you want to, but up until that time, McDonald's had been making their French fries in beef tallow, which is animal fat, and which, by the way, is not incredibly unhealthy. Now, what might be unhealthy is the idea that it's deep fried, but it's a saturated fat, and that's what they had used since their inception. Well, there was so much public pressure that came from the CSPI that they eventually just gave in, and they stopped using beef tallow and switched over to hydrogenated vegetable oil, which is completely trans fat. And then, so they fast forward less than a decade, and all of a sudden science comes out and says trans fat is very harmful for the human body and in some cases fatal. Guess who came out against McDonald's for their use of trans fat? Same organization, CSPI. And they had flipped on a dime to say, we have always said that trans fat is bad, but their own documentation revealed that that wasn't their stance, and that they had made an egregious mistake. I'm just telling you right now, there are organizations that have lots of money, and there are government organizations that kowtow to the money, because it is really all about the love of money, to say this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. But I'm going to tell you right now, we can live above and apart from all of that if we'll just seek out food the best we can, as close as we can, to the way God made it. It'd be helpful to our bodies. It'd be much more healthy than man-altered foods, and we would all be better off because of it. It was the CSPI. I'm going to leave you on another cliffhanger. It was the CSPI who had the greatest amount of influence in creating something years ago called the food pyramid, of which the base of the pyramid is grains, carbohydrates, and starches. According to the food pyramid, you ought to be eating more of those things than anything else above it, because the pyramid goes like this. So whatever's at the bottom, you need the most of, and then this, and in this, and in this. And I'm going to tell you that has been one of the greatest errors of human food consumption, to fall into that food pyramid thing. And we're going to pick up there when we come back to talk about grains and their bedfellow, the one you've been waiting for, sugars. Heavenly Father, Lord, we do thank you for your word, that, Lord, you've not left us without revelation. And God, if we would just live our life